So let's talk about COVID-19. And we always begin this show at the top of the show at 6 o'clock with looking at the latest numbers of COVID-19 in the country and in the world. And lately, the health CS, Muthui, told us, in fact, people have been talking about getting into the fourth wave. We never really got out of the third wave. And we are seeing a spike in numbers still in the third wave. The numbers as they have been looking lately, Ndu, and you said today, how many were recorded yesterday?
591.
591.
And that's on a low side because it's coming off the weekend for yesterday.
Yeah. So we're going to be having now more and more numbers, maybe coming into the following week.
Yep.
The health CS has already cautioned and said, look, today as we stand, you may be required to go to a hospital. In Nairobi, you'll find it difficult getting a bed. If you need to be admitted to a health facility in Nairobi, you may have difficulty accessing a bed in ICU or HDU or even in an ordinary COVID-19 ward. Why? Because we have seen a surge in the number of cases, a surge in the number of cases that require hospitalization. So the government has just been coming out, and what the health CS was saying is, look guys, we need to up our game in terms of making sure that we observe the measures, making sure that we do what we need to do. Let's expand this conversation by speaking to the government. And joining us from the government is the Principal Secretary in the State Department of Broadcasting and Telecommunication, Esther Koimet. She joins us via video link. Good morning, Madam PS.
Good morning, Eric, and thank you for having me.
Asante sana. Welcome to the Situation Room. Would have loved to have you here, so we give you a hot seat. You enjoy a bit of warmth. I'm sure it's very cold out there.
I'd have loved that. Yeah, it's not too cold, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the numbers as we see rising bring into the fore the reason why we're having you in on the show today is so we need to enhance the communication around COVID-19, around the spread of COVID-19, and around what we all need to do. So from government point of view, is it that people have forgotten the information? Or is it that people have known the information, but, well, we are inundated with new information all over and every new day, including information about how to stay alive just by eking out a living, that maybe the information has been reduced? Why do we need to have like a fresh injection of information from government on COVID-19?
Thank you, Eric. I think one of the things that has happened is obviously that we have a new variant of this dreadful pandemic, and we are seeing it not just in our country but across the world. They tell us that it is a very contagious one. It spreads fairly fast, and so we are seeing increased cases. There has also been obviously laxity in our observing the COVID measures. So if you look, for example, at the way people wear masks, where they wear them, they don't really put them on correctly. You see them hanging below the nose, hanging by the neck, sometimes by the ear. We're not really being consistent with the way we wear the masks, with the way we keep the social distance, and so on. So I think what happens is whenever we have these containment measures, we up our game, and then the pandemic, the numbers get lower, the positivity rate gets lower, and then we sort of relax. Yeah.
What is the message? And I think this is one of the things that we talk about, that we've been speaking about from the very beginning, Madam PS. From the very beginning, it has been that what is the one communication that whether Kenyans close their eyes and they're asleep and they wake up from bed and they're going, what is that one message that we're trying to say? This is one thing that we must remember concerning COVID-19 at all times, regardless of whether there's a vaccine today, there's a cure tomorrow, whatever the case may be.
I think the message is that there is a pandemic around, and each one of us needs to protect themselves. It's personal responsibility, because when you're in that hospital bed, when you're in that ICU bed, you're alone, and you're battling the disease by yourself. The government is not there, the police is not there to enforce the measures for you. So it is really personal responsibility. Let each one of us be responsible, put on your mask correctly, ensure that you're, keeping social distance. Ensure that you're washing your hands, sanitizing, and if you feel unwell, get help. Get checked as soon as you can, and just make sure that you're keeping the containment measures. I think it's this personal responsibility.
When we talk about personal responsibility, it appears as if people are, not directly connecting personal responsibility with COVID-19. Because if you listen to people talking today, we'll talk about, the politicians and what the politicians are doing. We'll talk about why is the government restricting my movement? Why is the government restricting my freedoms? There's a disconnect between internalizing this personal responsibility and fighting COVID-19. Why do you think this is so?
Obviously, maybe there's the issue of the lives versus livelihoods, and we've had people say, I'd rather die trying. And I think that's why the government has been very sensitive to make sure that we keep a balance between the lives and livelihood. And then I think in the beginning, I think people had not come face to face with the reality of COVID. But increasingly, that is changing, because you're finding that someone who's been unwell, you've attended a funeral of someone who died. So I think increasingly people are becoming aware. The problem obviously is, when they are like political rallies and so on, people still attend. And I think that's why CS Kagwe always says, nobody is forcing you to go to these things, So I think it's just for the situation where people haven't come face to face with these things, sometimes it's difficult, to make a direct connection.
We see this, for example, when luminaries such as Governor Kiraito Murongi or Senator Amos Wako or even government spokesperson Colonel Cyrus Aguna came out and gave their own experiences. You could see people, associating. So I can see so-and-so saying they went through this experience of COVID. Do you think more of these is what is required? Basically, what I want to ask here is, in terms of communication, because you are in that docket, do you feel that we need to keep refreshing the communication messages? Because what we've been having is the same. Wash your hands, wear a mask, observe social distancing. Wash your hand, wear a mask, observe social distancing. It becomes just like one of those breathe in, breathe out kind of messages. So do we need to keep refreshing this information, and how is the ministry doing that?
Yes, we need to keep refreshing the information, and part of what we are doing now, and you're going to see a lot of government people, we are currently doing the principal secretaries coming out and having refreshing the message. We are seeing a lot of medical people. So if you look at people like Dr. Gitai Getinji, if you look at, there are a number of measures, and you see a lot of medical people, you see government people, you see people who have had the disease, you see visits to hospitals, just to make people see what this disease really is. Yeah. So we just have to keep reinforcing the message. And as I said, the message is also getting reinforced by people coming face to face with the disease, knowing someone who has been affected, knowing a family that has been impacted because, there has been deaths. And even when you go to the village now, at least when I go up country, people talk about it, and people know that it's within them.
One of the things that has been said over and over is that the efforts that are made by the ministry that you work in are negated by the political actors we have in the country, because they don't seem to comply by these rules. And what do I mean? I mean, if politicians know that when they visit, and I'm talking about the topmost politicians in this country, if you go to a public place, people will gather around you. If you attend a function, we know people will gather around you. And yet, they even go to the extent of having public meetings. So, these are major influencers in the country. So, if you look at the communication that your ministry is putting across, and if you look at the activities of our political class, I mean, do you really honestly think, madam, that we are actually going to make any headway? Because the influence of the politicians sometimes seems to surpass the efforts that your ministry is making.
I think this message is for all of us. The politicians, our political leaders, the ordinary monarchy, and all of us, because, as you said, they have also been affected. I mean, Governor Giraitu came out and talked about it. As you said, Senator Wako has come about. So it affects all of us, and the message is for all of us. And if you look at even the measures, it bans these public rallies. So we just hope that they themselves also show leadership in this particular area. But you've heard Senator CS Kagwe say that we have to be personally responsible. So don't attend these meetings. I know it's easier said than done. But because it is true, I mean, when you look at these political rallies, people are screaming, and then you can just imagine how the virus is spreading.
Yep.
And then they are completely on top of each other, so there's no social distance. So really our appeal also to the politicians is, let's all work together, let's all show leadership, and let's help ourselves and our people to fight this disease.
This space of conversation is actually dominated by these same people, politicians. They talk more than everybody else. There's always something, and we in the media don't help, because we help publicize these things that they keep saying, irrespective of whether they seem important or not. However, the dominance of this space, unfortunately, has dire consequences in the situation that we find ourselves in. Now, this, I think, goes probably beyond the ministry that you work in, Madam PS. And I am asking this question, knowing full well that I'm asking a question that may be beyond your docket, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Certainly, the instruments of power that the government has should enable the government to put a halt to some of these things we keep talking about. The question I'm asking is, beyond communication, why is the government not just putting these things to a halt? Forget talking about it, because the government talks, the politician talks. The Ministry of Health talks, the politician talks. Perhaps we should stop talking and do. Yes.
But you have said maybe you need to help us by not publicizing, because if they're not in the media, they will not do it. And let's all work together, because it's not that the government has not said there will be no meetings. I think, unfortunately for us, of course, we are also heading into a political season, and we are very political animals. So even as citizens, we like to consume these political messages. And as you said, sometimes we don't realize, like when I go into that political rally, I'm actually endangering my life. And as I said earlier, if I'm in that ICU bed, it is me and my God. So let's just all work together.
Comes back to personal responsibility. We have talked about this. We have talked about this a number of times on this show, and we ask ourselves, is it that the people have lost trust in their government, such that you decide, well, I will live the way I want to live, I will die if I die, I will survive if I survive, but the whole thing, the government is one noise-making entity out there that is trying to interfere with my life, and I'll not bother with it, because anyway, it doesn't help me. And I'm asking this because, look at this from this context. When cases of COVID were first announced in the country, we heard from very many people around the country who were saying, COVID what? The government needed money. We have heard that they got money. We have also seen the government throughout this time in the attempts at doing something, attempts at saying we are increasing the capacity of our healthcare facilities, attempts at saying we are increasing the number of beds, attempts at even putting them up. And what comes out of it is scandal after scandal. Scandal at KEMSA. Scandal at the other day, it was a Mbagathi facility, which there's a huge tent, which is supposed to be a COVID facility, but there's nobody who's been admitted there because it's not operational. A year plus down the road. So it gets to a point where you ask yourself, Is it that the people are just observing and seeing this government is too much talk and no action? So even this talk by government is just one of those things. The government doing its thing, and I've got to live my life.
But government, we elected it.
Well, that's very true.
So and we have a chance next year to get at these people and
Madam PS, between now and next year.
We have to be alive to be able to make those decisions.
Again, this really is not in the space that you oversee, but how many bodies must pile up before we actually realize that
These things are a bit serious.
yes, but anyway, forget the bodies piling up. Let me ask this question.
Yeah.
Since your docket is communication,
Mm-hmm.
do we perhaps consider that the communication that we are putting across in and of itself is actually not effective? That we are saying things that are important, but people are not understanding it as they should?
I think we need to always look at, are we being effective or are we not being effective? And we also need to get feedback from, the public and people like yourselves as to, are we being effective? And if we are not being effective, how best can we give the message? That's why we think, like the medical people who help us, Dr. Leo Zombajo, Gitahi Gipinji, as I said, and a number of them who come across, Dr. Amos himself, when they talk, they are medical people, they understand, and people listen. So that's why we also, seek the support of these people to be able to communicate. The messages that we give are messages that are actually developed with the Ministry of Health because they are the subject matter experts. And, we are open to suggestions. If there are better ways that we should be communicating, please let us know. But, we as I said, we are all in this together. We need to work together. We need to help each other. And we need to take personal responsibility.
Please go ahead and do.
I'm thinking, and even as we have messages that have been previously been passed by government, this would not be the first time that the government needed to send out a communication that then needed to be accepted or at least heard by the people. Because you're right, to have effective communication, there's the feedback channels also that must be opened for you to see if the message, went through its proper course. However, it seems as though in this particular instance, there's so many other things that are happening that then seem to befuddle the process. Because I think about messages that were sent from government, even though they were in partnerships with others during HIV. There are messages that come even most recently right now about polio vaccinations and things like that. There were messages that have come from government about the change of currency last year. There were messages about the census. There were messages about Huduma number. There were so many messages that seem to have been taken in by the people and then they now put the forward action. Why this seems to be so different, I really am having a problem understanding it. Is it that it caught up with everybody unawares and there was not enough planning to come up with a message that then people would accept? What would you see would have been the challenges why this particular messaging has not hit home in the way in which other messages from government have been accepted?
So I think it's also the nature of the pandemic because we give messages and we also have actions that, like when we had containment measures, for example. So you give that message, you do containment measures, but, then you have to enforce and people maybe have different experiences. There's impact on livelihoods, for example, and then you have a situation where those then get relaxed when the positivity rate comes down, and then you open up. So it sort of seems like that because of the pandemic, it seems like a never-ending thing. Yeah. You see, if you are doing currency, for example, you are implementing it as a time frame. You implement, you finish. If you are doing Huduma number, it's the same thing.
Sure.
If you're doing HIV, we communicate communicated for all those years, and it's a disease that's obviously different from this one in the impact that it has. So I wouldn't get HIV from somebody sitting next to me, whereas this one is just so disruptive that I think we are struggling, and a lot of people are struggling on the economic side. And so it's just like, as we said some earlier on, it's like, wash your hands, social distance, wear your mask, wear it correctly. But so I don't know if it's the effectiveness of the message itself or the nature of the disease and the disruption that it has caused in our lives.
I think you may have made history just a few minutes ago as being the first person with this message to having admitted that it's a struggle, and that we're all struggling to get it out. So you may actually have been the first one to say that we're having a problem, not really knowing how to do it. And I think that may be a good place to start, to say that we don't really know, and all of us need to work on this thing together.
Yeah, and we've done, we've had people going out into the communities across the 47 counties with public messaging. We use every opportunity that we have as public servants, the Ministry of the Interior through the Ngao system. We are actually out there talking about this disease, and that's why everybody has heard about it, has heard about wash your hands, social, all these things. So let's just keep working at it. Let's never lose hope, because look at the way the advanced countries are struggling. I was reading the other day about Israel now wanting to do a booster. Yeah. They had vaccinated all their people. They had relaxed the measures. Look at the U.S. They had said, look, if you are fully vaccinated, you can now go without a mask. Now they are saying mask up, So we are not the only ones. This is just a global pandemic, and it's affecting all of us.
The Chinese model, the Chinese structure of dealing with this is something that many people who claim to be democratic-minded would actually frown upon and say they're interfering with people's rights and they're interfering with their democratic freedoms. And yet, if you look at human nature and the way we express ourselves, human beings are more given to doing what they think they want to do rather than what they've been told to do. So some of these things arguably will be beyond the Ministry of Health, will be the ministry that whose functions you oversee. But then the question that again I would like to ask, even as I'm asking myself, this isn't the first time we've had a situation such as this one that is truly threatening. HIV did something similar, but it wasn't widespread in the sense that it seems to be one particular part of the country, the western part of the country, seemed to have felt the brunt of it. Now, I'm giving this as an example because I worked in that field for a long time, and the thing that I found amazing was you'd find a village where all the adults had died, and when you followed it up, it was probably with the exception of a grandmother or a grandfather, it was HIV. And yet the strange thing is, the adults who remained there were now these adolescents. And every once in a while, it wasn't frequent, you'd come across, especially in communities where they were near the lake and they were fishermen, you'd find an adolescent with two wives. They're 17, the one wife is 16, the other one is 14. And you'd ask the person, but are you not aware that the situation that you put yourself in is harmful? And the truth of the matter is, you then realize that what you're fighting is not HIV. What you're fighting is the mindset that people have with regards to how they should conduct themselves, even in the face of a pandemic that is actually threatening their lives completely, or even a situation where it is clear what the pandemic has already done.
Yep.
And unfortunately, what we're telling people with COVID is that wash your hands, wear a face mask. Now, is it a compliance issue? Again, I'm saying we are talking about human nature. And this is something that, much as you leave it to people to take responsibility, the Chinese approach should be considered.
But the Chinese approach works because the culture in China is the government speaks, you listen and you obey. And so you cannot I mean, if the government says do this, you do it. China is, we've been there many times. It's
Okay,
a very
I'm
orderly
going to say
society.
something that I will be blasted for, but I'm going to say it anyway. Why doesn't the government just declare a state of emergency? Because then it will have the same powers as the Chinese government.
Do you think people are going to follow it just because the government has said?
Will they have a choice? You think there'll be a choice? You think this will be a debating matter where?
But you see what the PS is saying?
Yes.
The people of China, it's not that the government necessarily rolls out the tanks on the streets
It doesn't
to
have to.
enforce.
Doesn't have
Okay?
to.
They have gotten to a point where they have this relationship with the government. Government tells us what to do, and we do it. But there's the other side of it. Because we trust that the government has our best interest at heart.
Yes, and we've seen
and
it also.
we've seen the government work.
Yes.
And that's where the issue also for me comes, Madam PS. Just like Ndu was saying, when the government tells us stay indoors on a certain day every 10 years and welcome strangers into your home and answer the questions that they ask you, we do that across the country. Nowhere are census enumerators chased away. They are welcomed into people's homes. They sit, they ask very personal questions, and we answer. In fact, the last time they were even telling us, weka kidole hapa, and we did it.
They tell you to bring out your children and
We
open their mouths
line
for
up.
vaccination.
They tell us the same thing for polio vaccine. Bring a child, and we do it. Why? Because we are willing to comply with the government. Maybe the other issue is when the government tells us last year when the government said stay indoors, many people in the urban areas especially stayed indoors for first couple of weeks until they're like, okay, come on. So now what's going to happen? You feel like the government is not working hand in hand with you. I think that's where an issue is, Madam PS. Maybe Kenyans feel that, you know what, the government is telling me to do something. I'm willing to do it, but the government is not working hand in hand with me on this journey.
But I am trying to see about the government working hand in hand with me. I think the real issue really is the economic impact of this thing, and the fact that some of the measures that are necessary in order to contain the spread of the virus impact on our livelihoods. Because if I am if I am somebody who needs to go out there to eke a living, I need to get out.
Yep.
And if I'm working in a construction site, for example, maybe there are many of us walking up and down. I'm carrying heavy things, maybe putting on a mask. I'm not breathing properly. So it's the practicality of the thing, which is why government was putting up those measures to support small businesses and so on, and which is why even now one of the best things would have just been to close restaurants, close all these places. But the government is aware that there is need to balance between the economic impact and the containing the disease, and that is where the issue of the personal responsibility is. Because if I'm a business person, I'm running a small restaurant, it is up to me. I should really make sure that now I'm ensuring that I have seating that is spaced out, that I am obeying all the standard operating procedures that are coming out of the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Industrialization, Ministry of Tourism, because these have been developed with stakeholders. So stakeholders have been called upon to come and work with the government and see how best to put in measures to ensure that we keep the economy running, that people's livelihoods are not really being impacted that badly. So it's just a balance.
P.S. Esther Koimet, thank you very much for walking down this rabbit hole. Now that you're here, you see that whole issue of government working with you hand in hand? Government came out, for example, with its social protection measures.
Yeah.
Support the creative industry with X amount of money. Support the elderly with X amount of money. Support the youth with X amount of money. Support the hospitality sector with X amount of money. To date, we are still hearing complaints from those in the hospitality sector, from those in the creative industry, that they have never received the support that was supposed to have come to them from government. Those that the information that we see out there is how government has mismanaged some of the money that has actually been appropriated into helping people on COVID times. You see now what I'm talking about? People feeling the government is asking me to do something, but it's not working with me hand
To do
in
it.
hand.
We keep, engaging with the different sectors on the issues that they have across government, and resolving whatever issues are there. So, for example, on the creative sector, there's been a lot of conversation going on, even with the regulator, with the relevant committees in Parliament, with our ministry, to look at where the challenge really is. And one of the big challenges they say is the CMOs and so on, but I don't want to really go down that discussion. But just to say that we are conscious of some of the issues, because if it is CMOs and these are industry institutions and organizations, then we need to see how to make this work and revisit that. But I as I said, but we also have to realize that the support that is given. Remember, it was given last year, and then after the new budget, there are new measures, and so on. So it just keeps happening. If you look at Cousin Pani, for example, every time it's come to an end, there has been renewal to just make sure that some of the people that are working on this are supported, and we get good feedback. For example, I went on a tree planting exercise in Elgeyo Marakwet, and the local community there, they were very, very happy about it. The county had used these people to plant trees and to do to clean up like the headquarters and so on, and they really said this should continue. So there are measures that have been put that are working. Part of the problem that we have is also we have a lot of I don't know what to call it. If you look at social media, there's also a lot of noise there. There's just to distinguish between what is real and what is not real on the ground can get difficult, because some of the messaging that is that's actually maybe not factually correct can be very loud.
Yeah. We see it happen all the time. But PS, we want to thank you very much for joining us. As we conclude the conversation, give a message then to the people who are listening and watching us this morning in terms of what we need to do to curb the spread of COVID-19 at present.
Yeah. Thank you very much again for having me. I think the message that I want to leave us with is one that the government is going to get a good number of vaccines, doses of vaccines, and we really need to come out to be vaccinated, because the message that we are getting from the medical people around the world is that vaccination works. Even though you can still be infected, the outcomes are not as severe as they would be if you are not vaccinated. So I think it's really to say, let's ramp up, let's avail ourselves of the opportunity to be vaccinated across the country as the vaccines come rolling out, because the government has the intention of vaccinating at least, say, 10 million people by the end of the year, and to reach about 26, 30 million by the end of next year, working towards that herd immunity that the medical people talk to us about. And then the issue of the personal responsibility, we cannot overemphasize it. It's what we need to do. So even as we go about our own duties, our own responsibilities, our own businesses, let us be conscious of the fact that this disease is with us, that we need to protect ourselves so that protect the next person that is with us, and hope that obviously that we overcome it with this vaccination that is going on around the world.
Asante.
I thank you very much.
Thank you
And
very
help
much.
us communicate. Help us communicate.
Yes, we do
Let's
that
all
every day.
communicate. We thank you.
Asante sana.
Thank you.
Esther Koimet, Principal
Asante.
Secretary, Broadcasting and Telecommunication. Asante sana. It's been a pleasure having the conversation with you. We hope to host you in the studio soon. You have a lot of information, not just on the current State Department, but also in Kenya's economy and what needs to happen and what's been happening. We hope to host you and you can get some of these insights from you.
Asante sana, I'd love to, and God bless you very much. And thank you for the good work you do.
Thank
you very much.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.